Okay, good, it works. All right, good evening. Thanks for joining us for the Cherry Hill Public Schools Board of Education Board Retreat in person. We've made it. And I will begin with the public notice. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Board Secretary on July 27th, 2021 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board at the Administration Building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for roll call. Mrs. Arroyo?
Here.
Mrs. Stratton? Mrs. Friedel?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mr. Avadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Ms. Stern? Here. Mrs. Tong? Mrs. Neary? Here. Okay, great. That now brings us to public comment. And as usual, it'll be 3 minutes, and it can be on any topic. And please state your name and municipality. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any public comment tonight, so that'll bring us right to our agenda for our board goals. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Jesse Adams from the New Jersey School Boards Association, and he'll be leading us through this process tonight.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'm fully vaccinated, so I'm going to ask, would anybody be in objection if I took my mask off while we facilitated the process tonight? Okay. All right. That's okay, like I said. All right, now, so let's get rolling. Tonight, basically, I was asked to come in and help facilitate your goal-setting session. But first, what I always do when I do goal-setting with the Board of Education is I want to make sure there's no misunderstanding about what we're going to do tonight. I've given you some handouts, and so the first handout I want to bring your attention to is the one with the nice little circles on it. That says district goals, and you see 4 big circles. We're going to talk about that because what I find with some boards, there might be a misunderstanding about the types of goals that are in a school district. And it's important to understand that because each goal represents something different. So let's start with the big circle at the bottom of the page there. It says district goals. You can see the elements that we at NJSBA have placed in that circle. Things like the program, instruction, staff, professional development, facilities, finance. Those are all elements that make this district work and ultimately drive the improvement of student achievement. That's what district goals are. District goals are focused on the district, improving and moving the needle as it relates to student achievement. Now, I've had a board member say, well, I see you've got facilities in there, you've got finance. How are those raising the bar for student achievement? And I give a simple, dumb answer. You've got a leaky roof in one of your buildings, and the 4th grade classrooms in that wing have nice little buckets that the custodians have put in place so that on a rainy day, they catch the drips. In the back of the room, there's a nice bucket, and rainy day, drip, drip, drip. Teachers at the front of the room, facilitating a lesson, engaging students in discussion. What do you think the folks in the back row that are sitting right next to that bucket are doing? A number of them are probably watching the bucket slowly fill up, wondering if somebody's going to come and dump it before it rolls over. Are they paying attention to what's going on in the lesson, in the class? Probably not. Knowing most third and fourth graders, they're preoccupied, their attention somewhere else. You take your finances, take some of your capital dollars, and you set a contract to get the roofs redone in that building. They all get fixed. The next rainy day, there's no bucket in the back of the room. Odds are those students are not preoccupied with the bucket, so hopefully some of them are now paying attention to the teacher. So that's helping their achievement. Every dollar you spend in a school district goes to student achievement. Regardless of what it is, whether it's transportation, facilities, every dollar in a school district should be focused on student achievement. If you're spending dollars and you can't reasonably say why you're doing it and how it helps the students and the staff to achieve growing student achievement, then you really ought to question why you're spending dollars in that area. So that's important to understand. District goals focus on the things you need to do in a district to raise the bar for student achievement. There's another caveat to district goals. In the statute, you as a board are required, you have the responsibility to evaluate one person every year. Superintendent has the responsibility to evaluate everyone. Has to make sure that happens, but you have the responsibility to evaluate one person every year. In the statute, there is a list of things that superintendents are required by the boards of education to be evaluated on. One of those items is district goals, the achievement of district goals. So it's important to understand district goals, everybody in the school district, from the top of the food chain, the Board of Education, to the lowest level employee in the district, is responsible for helping to achieve the district goals. But only one person is being held accountable, and that's your superintendent, because he's required by law to be evaluated against them. So he'll give you updates throughout the year, tell you how you're doing, and come year end, you will do an evaluation, and one of the elements, it's not the only element, but one of the elements you will evaluate on your superintendent is the achievement of the district goals. So that is what district goals are all about. There are boards who say, well, those are board goals, and that's where the confusion comes in. District goals belong to the Board of Education, okay? You have 4 functions as a board: policy, planning, oversight, appraisal, and two-way communication. That's right out of the Code of Ethics. So by law, that's what your role is. Planning, under your planning and responsibilities, that's where you set district goals, strategic planning goals, do your budget planning. All of those type of planning activities belong to you, the Board of Education. So you own the district goals, but you don't own them in a vacuum. I tell boards all the time, yes, ultimately, you own those goals, you approve them by vote, but you don't create them in a vacuum. I mean, there are some boards who don't even talk to the superintendent, they try to create goals. When I get those phone calls, I have a pretty interesting conversation with the board members that are calling me, because I tell them they're wrong. They need to be discussing the district goals with their educational leader. That's what it's all about. The other piece that sometimes folks lose sight of is that you are a Board of Education. You have 9 members that were elected. You have one person who's automatically a part of the board, even though they don't have voting rights. That's your superintendent. He is a member of the Board of Education. He just is not a voting member. And so you need to understand it. When I say the words, and you'll hear me say it, board team, I'm talking about you, the elected board members, your superintendent, and your business administrator. That is the board team. You are the ones who spend a lot of time together. And so you are the ones charged with making decisions for this district. So it's important to understand your superintendent is your educational leader. Therefore, he's a part of that conversation in setting district goals. So it's important to understand that you own the goals. Because those of you who've heard us at NJSBA talk about roles and responsibilities, the board is responsible for the what. What do you want for your district? You tell the district what you want through your policies, through your goals, through your strategic plans, through your budget. Those are all of the things that you established the what for the district. How everything gets done, how the district is run, how your goals are achieved, the how it gets done belongs to the superintendent and his team. That's the separation of church and state, right? You determine what you want, superintendent figures out how to make that happen. So it's important to understand that there is that distinction. So, but like I said, yes, you're establishing the what, but your superintendent is a part of that conversation when you get to the district goals. So that's that big circle, district goals. So what are board goals? You see the next circle to the left, up top, above it? Board goals are just what they are named. They are the board's goals. Board's goals are focused on you as a governing body. How do you improve your ability to govern in this district? That's what board goals are all about. How do you improve yourself? It's focused on your processes, your procedures, the things you need to strengthen as a board to be a more effective governing body. That's what board goals are. District goals, when you establish district goals, ultimately how it gets done gets determined by the superintendent through action planning, et cetera. Board goals, because they belong to the board, who do you think is responsible for developing an action plan for board goals? The board. All right, so it's important to understand the difference between district goals, focused on the district, board goals, focused on the board. The third goal, set of goals you see there in that touching the district goal circle is the superintendent goals. What are those? Every year your superintendent has an evaluation. You have a summary conference and you discuss strengths, areas of improvement. You have usually it's a pretty good discussion and how to work better as a team, and then ultimately there are opportunities for the superintendent to work on things that he believes will help make him a better superintendent to support you and the students of this district. Those are superintendent goals. They're driven, like I said, primarily from the evaluation process, but they're also driven from his professional development plan that he maintains for himself, is required to maintain. He briefs you every year that he's got one. You're not required to approve it, but he's required to let you know that he's working on things. Those are all part of his goals. So those are superintendent goals. And then the dotted line that takes you to merit goals, that's contractual. In the statute, you're allowed, if you put it into your superintendent's contract, to potentially offer merit goals. Merit goals are above and beyond the regular stuff. It's not the day job. It's things that you agree to that will move the needle even higher in the areas that are important to you as a board for this district. It's very prescriptive, that process. That process is controlled by the DOE. You will have a conversation if it's allowed, and the superintendent if it's allowed in his contract, he can request merit goals. You determine if you are going to offer them this year. You have that conversation. Superintendent will make some recommendations on potential goals. You all will deliberate, discuss with the superintendent, and come to an agreement on whatever number of merit goals that you believe are appropriate. And then those goals go to the executive county superintendent. Executive county superintendent has the final say on them. And the executive county superintendents do shoot them back to the board and say, unacceptable, 1 and 2 are okay, 3 and 4, you need to go think of something else because this is the day job. This is what he's already being paid to do. So, what do I mean by that? You set district goals. That's part of the day job. District goals in statute, he's going to get evaluated on, you're required to establish your district goals. So him working towards those goals, that's part of his normal operation as a superintendent. What you're looking for and what the ECSs are looking for, those things in merit goals that are above and beyond, that are going to take some extra effort to get whatever it is you're trying, whatever benefit you're trying to get for the district. That's what merit goals are. As I said, very prescriptive, approved by the ECS. You execute the year, superintendent comes back at the end of the year and says, I've achieved them. He shows data, et cetera, to prove it. You all say, yeah, looks like you did. You got to send those results to the ECS. ECS determines whether you're allowed to pay it or not. Based on, you might say, oh, great results. ECS may say, nah, 1 and 2, yes, didn't achieve it on 3. And you can only pay on 1 and 2. ECS has final say on what you pay on the merit goals. So it's a very prescriptive process, but those are the 4 basic types of goals in a school district. I'll stop for a second to see if anybody has any questions on that, because this is an important point, because boards do get confused between the term board goals, district goals, and sometimes they conflate the two together. Yes.
All right, so first of all, Jesse, thanks for spending your evening with us. But I guess, so for Mrs. Neary, so are we here to discuss board goals? Because it seems like, and the question comes out, I just want to clarify, is that, typically at this time of year, we would talk about, whatever we'd call it, we would talk about what you would describe as district goals. So I guess just from a level setting,
My understanding is we're here to talk district goals.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to make sure that,
Yes.
because when I see the term board goals, and I've seen that on your website, and that tends to tell me there might be a little bit confusion, and you're not unique. I do this with every board that I do goal setting with. This first conversation, I want to make sure that nobody's got a different view of what they think we're going to work on tonight. I've been asked to help facilitate district goals tonight. Okay. Other questions?
Thank you, Jesse.
I thought I heard someone say something. Oh, okay. All right, so that's just an explanation of district goals and goals in general. So let's talk about the process I'm going to walk you through tonight. One of the documents I handed you was a flow chart. It says district goal setting process, has a lot of nice boxes with arrows on it.
Is it easier, Jesse, if you sit down at the table or in the seat and hold the microphone? I don't want you to have to stand all the time.
I think
You sure?
it's
Okay.
better for me because I can see everybody.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, as you're standing there speaking to
And
this.
I apologize for the people that I have my back to, so.
Okay.
So, when I do goal setting with the board, this is the process I follow. So I want to make sure, this is the first time I'm ever doing goal setting with you, so I want to walk through the process I typically walk through, just so you're aware what the steps we're going to take tonight. What I do when I kick off our discussion is I don't let board members speak first. I want to hear from your educational leader first. That's my process. So I will ask your superintendent to provide some information and his thoughts. And the context of those thoughts will be your previous year's goals, anything you want to say, comment about. Are there some things in previous year's goals that you being the superintendent, might be recommending to the board for consideration to carry over and continue and maybe heighten some things? You may have a good program going that was set up from the previous goal, and it's gotten most of the results you were looking for, but there's more to get. He may say he wants to extend that one and carry that for another year or whatever. But I give the superintendent the opportunity to talk about the previous year goals, any comments and things that he wants the board to think about, any potential recommendations around those goals, as well as for the new year that we're looking at, what are those focus areas and recommendations that he and his staff have talked about that he is recommending to you for consideration. Remember, you guys are the ones who ultimately have to approve the goals because they're your goals. But I look for him to give you as much input as possible on the thoughts of the educators. I will, I will capture his thoughts on the flip chart. Then I will open it up for board members, for your opportunity to provide any of your thoughts, any things that you may be thinking of or recommendations that you want to put on the table for consideration. I'll capture those. Once we have the superintendent's thoughts, the board members' thoughts, we will have a conversation. As a full board, a board team, we will discuss what's been recommended by everyone, and the goal is to get to a point where we have a consensus of the 3, 4, 5. And the SBA, we recommend no more than 5 district goals for a school district. 5 district goals. A district that has 5 goals is a district similar in size to you. Large districts. Smaller districts, 1,000 students or, whatever, they're going to have maybe up to 3 goals. Why? Staffing. Look at the administrative team. A larger district that has a strong cast of administrators has the ability to focus on multiple goals. A small district that has a superintendent/principal and a BA, you give them 5 goals and that will be a struggle getting the day job and educating the students and hitting the goals. So we tell boards, think about your situation, and we tell board members, be reasonable that you understand what your district can handle. We recommend no more than 5. For districts that use New Jersey School Board's evaluation tool, the first section of that is achievement of district goals. The superintendent can only put up to 5 goals into the system, and we built it that way because that's our recommendation for max. So we built it so you can't max out. So you can't go above the max. So talking through, we hopefully will get to whatever number of goals you decide on from a consensus. So we'll decide on those areas of focus that you're looking for, and then ideally we'll have some conversation about what kind of things are you looking for in that focus area, and then depending on how this evening goes, because there might be a twist to it after your superintendent does some of his talking, but typically, once we've gotten to that point where I have captured and I understand the 3 to 4 or 5 focus areas and the kind of thoughts around what you're looking for in each of those areas, then that's when the evening will end. I will take this information, go back and create goal statements for each one of those focus goal areas. I will return those goal statements back to the superintendent and your board president for a meeting with you all to discuss. And now you have at least a baseline to work with. And through your discussion, you can wordsmith it, tweak it, modify it. And you don't hurt my feelings if you don't like my words. But it's your opportunity to take that to make sure it fits what you want from a goal statement for each of those areas. And if you look at the triangle where it says consensus, that I just talked about getting to that. Once we have that, I will go off and create those statements for you and then return them to you. Once you have them back, it's up to you to then get back together, have a conversation with your superintendent on the goal statements to make sure they're accurate and reflect what you want. And then you've established the what. Those goal statements are what you want as a board. So you've done your job from a planning perspective to establish the what, the district goals. The how is now in the superintendent's court. Our recommended process, and what I will also ask you to pull out, is there's a document, a table document. It looks like this. It's an action plan template. This is what we use at NJSBA that we give to boards and superintendents as a template. You don't have to use it, but it's what we recommend from an action planning as it relates to goals. So, you have a goal. We've agreed goal number 1 is X, Y, and Z. The goal statement would be the X, Y, and Z goal statement. The superintendent would take this or whatever document process he wants to use, but our recommendation is that he now takes that goal statement and creates specific objectives to focus on that goal area. We recommend, 3, 4 is a reasonable number of objectives, and then for every objective, the rest of the document, the action plan gets laid out. We talk about SMART goals, and I have a resource document that I've given you that talks about SMART goals, and this document helps you, the superintendent, and the board make sure that you are creating SMART goals. Those action plans, you can see. They identify the major activities, the major action that you're doing, what board and staff needs there are, basically who are those individuals that are going to be working that action, what resources does the superintendent need to make that action happen. Part of your responsibility is providing resources for this district. So that's an opportunity for him to identify if he needs something special to complete that action. And then timelines. The timeline is the schedule. When during the year what is the timeline for the execution of that action throughout the year? And then, ultimately, how do you know you achieved it? That last column. Indicators of success. We recommend that superintendents, when they do a template similar to this, they identify the staffing, resources, the timeline that they're looking at, and to tell the board what is going to be that indicator of success that when I report to you that we've hit that indicator, you know the district has achieved that action item. So that's the template I will read. Basically, when I return the goal statements, they will be on this form. It will be that goal, district goal at the top. I'll send the superintendents, if you have 4 goals, there'll be 4 of these sheets in a Word format that I will send so that superintendent can replicate it and create objectives. One objective for this sheet, all the actions associated with that objective. Objective 2, another sheet with all the actions. So in the end, what you approve, and we recommend you approve your goals and objectives at the first meeting of the new year, school year, in September. Why do we recommend that? Because that's when everybody's back. Good time. Hopefully you get folks who have turned out, who want to hear what's going on, your staff's back, and you as a board are approving the district goals for the new school year. And everybody hopefully understands and is on the same page as this is what the district is going to focus on for this next year. In addition to everything else we do, here are the things we're trying to achieve this year that will raise the bar in student achievement. And it's a journey. Sometimes board members get impatient. We got to fix everything in 1 year. It doesn't happen that way in education. So it's important to understand you're on a journey. So your district goals should be helping you take those incremental steps to improve student achievement in your district. So Once I return this back to the board, superintendent and the board, superintendent will do his thing, and he should then come back to you and say, okay, here's the goals, the objectives, the actions, and that's a conversation the board team has to make sure we're all on the same page. You may have questions, he'll answer the questions, there may be modifications, but in the end, when you're all done and you're all on the same page, what you approve at that first meeting is the goal statement, the objectives, and the action plan. That's the district goals for the year. Once you approve them, we recommend you stick them up on the website so everyone can see them. Also, periodically throughout the year, we recommend that you, as a board, have a business rhythm, that you get periodic updates about how we're doing as a district against the goals, so that you're not waiting until March or April when it's time for the superintendent to start getting his self-assessment together for evaluation, that you're hearing for the first time how we did with the goals. In theory, by the time you get to March, April, you should have a real good idea about where you stand on the achievement of your district goals, because you've been getting, hopefully, periodic updates throughout to keep you all in the loop. All right, so that's the process that I typically try to help boards through. So questions on the process? Comments, concerns? Yes.
Hi, thank you for the information. Just a quick question. Prior to this meeting, Dr. Malash had shared with us board goals from other districts. And so I was reading through some of those and happened just to notice that other districts had in their goals and kind of their like actionable steps that were underneath them, they did not have any kind of quantitative like measures in there, like just example, like reduce student achievement by 10% or by 15%. It was more, here's our goal, here's the actionable steps that we're going to take to get there. Can you just speak to that positive, negatively about like putting like detailed quantitative, like,
Well,
you know,
to
measures
answer
in
your
place?
question, in the underneath the circle document that you had, there is another document that has a big triangle on it. So pull that out, and basically, NJSBA's view of goals is that they should be SMART goals. Some of you may have heard that term. If you work in industry, you hear it all the time. I used to work for Lockheed Martin, so I used to hear it all the time. But what are SMART goals, right? The acronym stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And so when you look at that template I gave you, basically, those activities, you have to fit. By completing this, you're going to have built SMART actions. So the goal itself may be overarching. Each of the objectives will be specific to what the superintendent believes he needs to focus on to achieve that overarching goal. Your SMART part of your goals will be spelled out in your action plans. So we recommend to boards, this process will give you SMART goals. The goal, the flow down within the goal gets you to actions that meet the definition of SMART. Therefore, you have SMART goals. That's why we tell boards, we recommend you approve the whole package. You're not just approving the 4 or 5 goal statements. You're approving the entire game plan for the year. That's for each one of those goals with that objectives and action plan, you've got a SMART goal. That's what we recommend. We recommend a lot of things. What boards do, how they execute, it's totally up to you. It's not mandatory. We just give you our thoughts on how we recommend you go about doing that. That, like I said, that will give you, that's why when I say, if you post that on your website, someone goes to say, okay, well, what's goal number 1? They would see goal number 1, the objectives, and all the action plans. That's goal 1 in its entirety. That's a SMART goal because you've got those indicators of success, the timelines, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we recommend. So hopefully I answered why you see some things that may not match what I just talked about. So, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
To that, to the same question that Ms. Schultz just asked, like, some of them seem a little, like, vague, I guess, because for me, I would say, like, if we're looking at the one about student voice or something like that, to offer opportunities for student voice, but how are we going to measure that when there's no actual deliverable on that?
See.
If we don't put, like, measure student voice by having, giving us some sort of, I guess, thing to actually measure and look at.
Right. That's where you're going, this is where this document comes into play. Measure student voice. To me, that sounds more like an objective versus a goal. But let's say using that as a goal example, going to measure student voice. Well, what objectives flow into that? What are the 3 or 4 things that we need to focus on to do that goal? And then with each one of those objectives, what are all the actions and the measurables? The indicators of success are the measurables, the data that you should be looking for as proof that these were accomplished, how you measure it. That's where you're going to get that detail. You're not going to write a goal statement that has all those measurements in the
Got it.
goal statement.
So that's what I think clarifies it for me. So we are going to get specific with what we're actually going to measure to make sure that the goal was obtained or reached.
That would be my
However, it doesn't
recommendation.
have to sum up to this overall goal statement that we lay out.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit general, and then the actions will show what we're actually making it specific.
The basic goal statement usually is somewhat overarching for a specific area. It's the granularity and the detail and the work is the objectives and the action plan. And like I said, the big thing, to me, I was a board member for 22 years, sitting on 2 boards when the law allowed that. I was a glutton for punishment. I was board president, 7 years on one, 4 years on the other. And the most important element on the action plan for me as a board member was that last column, the indicators of success. So when our superintendent put the objectives and the action plan together, he told us what was going to be that item that you as a board member would see and the district would see that would indicate the data and the information that proved it was successful. So throughout the year, we were looking for what I used to call it the red, yellow, green, the stoplight activities are related, back to my Lockheed days, but red, yellow, green. If there's an action, it's due within the next 6 months, and the superintendent said, hey, we're red there. Red means we're in trouble. We're not achieving what we need to achieve. Yellow means we have some work to do. Green means we're on track. So the conversation with the board was, hey, we're yellow in this area on these actions, and the superintendent would tell us what the return to green plan was. What are the things we're doing to get back on track? Or maybe something has happened in the state that's changed what we're trying to do and can do, and the superintendent tells you that. But at least, based on that indicator of success, you can have that conversation. Superintendent can keep you updated on how you're tracking as a district. Did that give you a warm, fuzzy feeling?
I mean, it makes sense, I guess, because I don't want to get too specific, but like when I see stuff like analyze school start time and end times and convene discussions involving students, staff members, parents, and community, then I would immediately want to be like, that results in what? So that's why I'm asking, you
Yeah,
know?
and so,
So, I don't know.
Yep, no, I understand what you're saying. Before I get off of this, did that answer the smart question? Smart? Okay, so we're good there. All right, so the other documents I gave you, I'm not going over, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just a quick question. Some of the the sample goals we were shown from other districts had longer term, more than 1 year
Yes.
goals, right? And I think they're definitely, if we're going more big picture, there's going to be that component. So do we take the longer term and just kind of think about like year 1, year 2, year 3, and that in this, and do we also state the longer term, or do we not?
Yes, you can. There's nothing, district goals are annual goals, but there's nothing wrong with multi-year goals. That's perfectly all right. When I see a multi-year goal, what I typically see in the action plan, the timeline's going to tell you, this year we're going to do this, this, and this. Next year we're going to do this, this, and this. Here's the timeline. Here's the indicators of success. So how do you assess that when the superintendent is being evaluated? You're going to focus on those actions that were required in this multi-year goal that were going to be achieved this year. He'll do his self-assessment to let you know everything he did, for the items scheduled for this year to make it happen. So the goal itself may not fully be achieved yet, but you are able to evaluate in progress where you're at, and are you moving towards achievement, significant improvement, significant progress, et cetera, et cetera. So there's nothing wrong with that, and a lot of districts do. I have a couple districts I did goal setting with, and they carried over one or two of their goals from the previous year because they were programs that they wanted to continue, but they also wanted to tweak it to add, because it was so successful, we want to add another group or another area. But that's perfectly within your purview to have multi-year goals. Okay? The other documents are resource documents only. I give them to you. You'll see they talk about data. We tell boards all the time, make your decisions based on data. Don't base it on emotion. Don't base it on a whim, a perception. Base your decisions on data. There is a ton of data in education, and your superintendent probably provides you a ton of it on a routine basis. But as you look at your goals and objectives and actions for the year, base it on data. Look for results that give you those indicators of success that you can tie back to data. So those sheets I gave you were just a couple of tools on the decision-making cycle, questions school boards should ask, because a lot of times they say, well, we don't run the district, and you don't, but what are appropriate questions from our level so that we're not crossing that line into administration? And this gives you the kind of, how boards can ask and discuss data, the kind of things that are at the level that you are, that keeps you out of that danger of trying to run the day-to-day of the school. So focusing on data gives you an idea of where the pulse is, where you're going, what the trends are. That's how you know, as a board, which is your responsibility to ensure that the district is being well run. You do that through data. That's how you get the pulse. So those are resource documents you can throw in your board bag. And so with that, let's get rolling. What I will say is I'm going to turn it over to your superintendent. I will pass out a couple of documents. One I'm going to pass out is your last year's goals on the website. Superintendent sent me a copy of those. Do you have those already?
I gave them all a copy, Mr. Adams.
And the draft, they have the draft.
They have that in paper form as well.
So, I will turn it over to your superintendent right now to let him just talk about last year's goals, some of the things they're recommending for this year, and then we'll get to board comments, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to slide the chart over here.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Adams, and thank you for the very detailed discussion going over process and information and what it looks like for the development of goals. The board members each have a copy of our board goals, the goals from last year, 2020-21, and then a draft for this year, 2021-22. You've also received these electronically. They have not changed since you received them electronically. Just for a little background, Mr. Adams, as we looked at goals, the development of the goals for 2020-2021 last summer and into the fall was a little bit different for us as an educational organization. In February of 2020, the Board of Education adopted 3 strategic planning goals that followed a strategic planning process within the district. Those 3 strategic planning goals were centered under student wellness, purpose and passion, and connecting beyond our classrooms, and were set to establish a long-range vision for the district to follow from 2020 through 2025. So as we went into the process last summer and into the fall, we adjusted the structure with which we used to develop the goals. For a number of years, we had maintained the same topic area or the same topical areas of the goals. Typically, there were about 4 goals or so. Some years there may have been a 5th. Very rarely did we ever go down to 3, but typically there were 4 goals that were adopted. Last year, we did adopt 3 goals, and again, under those headings of student wellness, purpose, and passion, and connecting beyond our classrooms. We had discussion during the course of the year about where we were in achievement. Our process within the district is we have the 19 building principals and the assistant principals at the middle schools and high schools. They develop their own building goals and then their own professional goals based on the district goals that are initially adopted. So it carries the work down to the level with the students and with the staff within each of the smaller educational communities. In the draft of the goals that I presented, or that were developed, and I'm thankful that the central administrative team is here. That all but 2 of our members, 2 of our superintendents are unable to be with us tonight. They are on vacation. The rest of the team is seated over on the side. Everybody has had input into the goal development. We kept the goals underneath those same 3 areas. Again, continuing with the board's intention of the long-range vision and the long-range planning, student wellness, purpose, and passion, and connecting beyond our classrooms. There is some carryover from last year into this year. Some of that necessitated by the fact that the school year certainly did not look like a traditional school year, as we were impacted by the pandemic and the things that came along with that. So under the area of student wellness, the first piece that I identified is continue the work of the district-wide Student Wellness Committee with representation from each school. Continuing on from last year was develop and launch a student wellness tab, Cherry Hill Public Schools website that highlights the social, emotional learning core competencies, wellness, and relational strategies. Document the incorporation of the Thrive Alliance training and daily practice at all 19 schools. We are working as a school district with the Thrive Alliance during this year, who's providing training to our counseling and student assistance counselor staff throughout the district. That's going on throughout the course of the academic year. So looking at the training that happens with the adults and then how is it being implemented in daily practice. And then monitor the implementation of Care Solace as a district resource. Care Solace has been presented to the board. This is a concierge service to match up mental health services with students and with staff members. This will be initiated. We have a training at the end of the summer, and this will be initiated through the district throughout the course of the academic year, but as a service that will provide for the 1,700 employees and 11,000 or so students. Second statement was analyze school start times and end times, convene discussions involving students, staff members, parents, and community. This is something that came up as part of as discussions with the board during the 2020-21 academic year, growing out of adjustment in our schedule at the high school level and over a longer term discussion about school start times with high school students. In looking at school start times, because of the way that we operate in Cherry Hill, anytime you talk about school start time, you also have to talk about school end time, and it is connected what goes on at the high school level, the middle school level, and the elementary school level. Third one was promote shared ethical and performance values visibly and comprehensively for students and staff through the district's cultural proficiency, equity, and character education work. Then underneath that, analyze school and district information regarding discipline, student placement, and student performance outcomes. Implement a district-wide equity audit. pursue district-wide, quote, "no place for hate" designation through the Anti-Defamation League, provide anti-bias training to all district staff, revise the student code of conduct at all levels using the equity and character education competencies to guide the process. In the second area of focus under purpose and passion, building principals will adopt building-specific goals that align with the district's strategic planning goals. Building-based goals will review data-driven and research-based school action plans that are specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound, and that build on demonstrated success. Again, if you were to go to the first letters of each of those pieces, you would recognize SMART, as Mr. Adams talked about. Multiple student learning outcomes will be assessed to determine the effectiveness of the academic program, defining success to include traditional assessments and non-traditional assessments, especially in light of what's occurred with the pandemic during the course of the last 18 months. We have involved ourselves a great deal more in talking about how do we define and measure student success, what does that look like beyond the traditional paper and pencil. Number two, monitor the academic program with a focus on the Road Forward plan, student assessments, the implementation of the African American Studies course. This is a new graduation requirement at the high school level, and the high school concepts classes. This is a change in the delivery of special classes at the high school level in terms of how they are being staffed. Number three, create, share, and document opportunities at the school and district level for student voice. Number four, analyze hiring practices and outcomes in diversifying the certificated staff. And underneath that, update job descriptions and job postings to reflect a district that values diversity, equity, and inclusion to attract and retain candidates from a diverse background. Then number five, create an actionable plan to develop a bond referendum. This is a carryover as well from 2020-21. Develop and publish a time frame for a bond vote. Communicate information obtained from the facilities analysis of the current physical structures within the district to determine the scope. B, identify projects to be included in the bond referendum. C, provide the opportunity for two-way communication between the Board of Education and stakeholder groups, including students, faculty and staff, community members. And then on the third area of focus under Connecting Beyond Our Classrooms, number one, create, share, and document opportunities at the school and district level for student service activities. Number two, develop opportunities for students to meet with, interact with, communicate with peers and professionals beyond the Cherry Hill School District. Document and share the opportunities, creating a set of best practices to be enhanced in subsequent academic years that would carry over into subsequent years. Number three, analyze the sending areas for the 3 middle schools and 12 elementary schools, developing a comprehensive plan for boundary adjustments. And number four, analyze budgeting practices and allocation of funds. Review middle school supply and cost allocations. Align use of capital reserve funds with bond referendum decisions. Design projects with a holistic approach. Analyze budget structure, the individual budget lines, modify and condense where optimal, and work with grant writer to seek grant funding. So those are the areas. I would contend again with the administrators, rather robust and exciting set of areas to focus on during the course of the year.
Board members, open it up for comments, questions, other recommendations. Yes, Carol?
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. This is very robust and detailed. And, I went through as you were reading them and had read them before, the action words that we have: analyze, create, communicate, all of those things tell us what we're going to do. There is one that, to Corinne's comment about measurable, and it's under purpose and passion, number 2, where it says monitor the academic program. So I guess to me that's a little vague, not, and so I'm wondering like what we can do What does that entail? How will we measure it? What will tell us about the monitoring process if we're moving forward? Or what is it that we want to measure with that?
I would add to that, Mrs. Matlock, for like, is it monitoring for efficacy, or are we just monitoring to see that we implemented or completed it, or that kind of thing? So that would stick out to me as well.
So I like this action plan format, because I think when you attempt to take these goals and put it in this format, that's when you're going to have the challenge to see what resources, timelines, and the indicators is going to help flush what makes sense and what doesn't. This is a really clean, simple way to do it, because I think we don't want to overcomplicate. So for me, I see components in here of things I would ideally want to address as a goal, like the boundary adjustments and the reconfiguration, and then we need to get the timelines in there and the indicators around that. But I think it's ideation still.
Just a couple of thoughts. You know, in trying to prepare, this is my first year on the board, so it's very new for me, but in trying to prepare, I really thought about kind of why I even ran for the board, and what do I feel like, you know, what are the pain points that I think we see in the district, right? That I feel like is our job to kind of identify and really help move the needle with. And there's a few items for me. I think redistricting, we're on the path for that. I think that's really important to continue on that. Although it's not a primary focus for me, personally, in terms of my involvement with the board, but I absolutely am 100% behind the effort. We're focusing on bond, so that's really important. We've also had this long-standing goal of what we used to call closing the achievement gap. I don't know if that's still what we call it, but we consistently have the same low math testing scores on statewide, on the state testing compared to other districts, which is now a little bit up in the air with the lack of testing for now 2 years in a row. But to me, that's a really critical issue that we really look at specifically. How do we improve our math achievement? And in thinking about that, I'm not an educator, so I don't kind of know what's a realistic measurable goal. I thought 10% improvement, but we need some data and we need something to work towards. And part of that, one of the efforts the district is already in process towards that is changing the math curriculum at the middle school level. But there's a longer range plan for that. So to me, like that math curriculum assessment and the math achievement, which to me is also feeds into kind of like the modernizing of our approach to learning, math and science being more and more prominent in kind of connecting beyond the classroom, what kids are doing after they finish K through 12, ensuring they've got a really good foundation because it's a really big piece of it. So like that's something that I think about. Again, it's all new to me, so these are just ideas. I'm really excited you're here to help us with them.
Those are the kind of things that you as a board, you need to be thinking about. What are the aspirations of your community? Because that's part of your responsibility, is to know and understand what the aspirations are of your community for the students in your district.
And one of the other pain points that I talk about a lot and I ask questions about a lot is special education specifically. And, aspirationally to me, I think about how do we focus more on kind of supporting our students in special ed in the ways that help them be successful, rather than focusing so much on compliance, which I think is more of where we've, I think we've seen I think, my understanding, and I could be wrong, but I think that we have data that shows that we probably need to shift our focus a little bit. And I don't know I don't know the right measurement. I don't know if it's kind of looking at like decreasing our due process, percentages, because that may indicate that we're moving away from more of like a compliance focus and more towards like how do we provide for the needs. So those are just kind of like aspirational my big picture thoughts coming into this. And I just am a little, like, some of the things I was a little confused about, and just trying to understand, Mr. Adams, like, you kind of talked about, like, the day-to-day, like, what's already part of the job versus, like, so some of the things that are on here are things we're implementing, and I would assume we have to assess as we go along, are they successful? Is that something we should have as a goal? Like if we've hired an outside group to provide a service, is that part of a goal to make sure that we're monitoring that, or is that more part of the day-to-day?
To me, asking me, if you brought in a service organization to help in a certain area, you want to know that those dollars are being well spent. I wouldn't establish a goal to track that and monitor that. I would expect the staff, superintendent, and the managers of that service to periodically come back and tell you how your dollars are being spent. Yes, you all provided the resources so that we could contract with XYZ Corporation because we told you this is the benefit we're going to get for our students. So you guys approve the expenditure. You should want to know, are our dollars being well spent? And superintendent can very easily provide data and information on, we invested and here's what we're getting, here's the bang for the buck that we're getting. But I wouldn't set that as a specific goal that you would monitor to track. I would rely on that being part of the business rhythm, the day-to-day operations, and the periodic updating of some of the special items that may have been, that this board may have invested in for the district.
Okay, so maybe some of these that are like that specific, that are more like monitoring activities versus planning a new approach on how to get there, or making a specific, looking for a specific like decrease or increase, or maybe that's a little bit, maybe those are not, that was my thought. I'm not sure that those are exactly goals or objectives, but
well, they would,
monitoring
to me,
activities.
they would be part of an action plan.
An action plan.
So if you had a goal that would, in fact, what I did look at, when your superintendent told me that back in February, you guys established your strategic plan goals, I believe, under student wellness, purpose and passion, connecting beyond our classrooms, there is a goal statement for each one of those. And I see it in the minutes of your strategic planning committee. Student wellness, the goal statement around student wellness is create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. So it ties into that student. So that's your, from a strategic planning perspective, that's your overarching goal. What you take for that on an annual basis, you should take that overarching goal, and each year, superintendent would identify several specific objectives that the district is going to go after to achieve that goal. And then for each of those objectives, if you develop action plans, you've got the smart actions that you need for, and that will give you ultimately those indicators and the data that you get to see how you're doing. Your second one, purpose and passion, develop highly engaging, learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. The third one is connecting beyond our classrooms, provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed, empathetic agents of change in the world. one of the things I'm looking for is, to your point, the focus on the achievement, assessments, closing the achievement gap, improving professional development staff, skills, techniques. I would say that probably falls into your purpose and passion goal, developing highly engaging, learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. Within that goal, these are the kind of things that I would expect to show up as objectives, focused on different elements of your education process, student achievement, the whole child development, those kind of things, and then specific actions tied to those objectives on things that you're doing in the district that would be measurable, and you could see the outcomes as you're going through the year. That's how I would see the linkage. When I look at these goals, I saw the staff wellness and all, I said, okay, well, there's got to be more to this, and that's where I saw this language. So I'm assuming that is the correct language for your strategic planning goals. So kind of if you follow that flow, you've got your goals. To me, these would be more of objectives, and some of the sub-bullets are actions. So in my flow, my thinking, just looking at it for the first time over the last 2 days, preparing to come in here, and I was missing this piece until your superintendent told me today that the board had approved 3 strategic planning goals focused around these 3 areas. And when I found the language, I could connect the dots. And so for me, looking at it, I say, you've got 3 multi-year goals, because that's what they are. Because it says here on this, 2020 to 2025. So I'm assuming that's your thought process that you've approved. So to me, every year, those are your 3 goals. Each annual goal-setting period, those are your 3 goals, but the objectives will be different every year to take those incremental steps to meet that overarching goal, so that in 2025, when you complete this strategic plan journey, you will have achieved what your overarching statement says. And the objective evidence will be the objectives that you identified each year to focus on, and the actions that got accomplished in those years, and the data, the indicators of success that show you're moving the needle ahead in each one of these areas. That's, like I said, that was a missing piece for me coming into the day. Once I had that, because when I looked at these originally, I said, these seem to be more objective type, action type. There's got to be more. And like I said, that was a missing piece of the puzzle, and it just happened into it in my conversation with the superintendent when he said the board had approved 3 goals around those headings. So I see that this is just me talking, outsider looking at the process. I see you've got 3 goals. I see what your superintendent's recommending potentially are specific objectives focused in each one of these areas. And like I said, there are some actions. I think there's, to your point about the action plan, details, resources, timelines, that's the work that we're not going to do tonight. But I think that's the work that I would recommend would be the next step, assuming, because you already have goals. So I don't think we need to reinvent goal statements, because you've got 3 that you've committed to for the next 5 years, or 4 more years, I guess. But really, your focus now is developing objectives for the 2021-22 year that you're going to.
So I think there was some confusion when we generated those, Jesse, because there was an understanding that that was the strategic vision versus ongoing goal statements that would be the accountability year over year, which thankfully these items roll into that. But then how do we ensure that we capture these items as part of the goals, right? Like, so I see equity, that's a very broad piece, right? It encompasses special needs. We would want ADA under that, ADA compliance, right? Like, how do you have equity and not capture any of those items? So like, how do we ensure that we capture that within our district goals for the year, now that we understand that the strategic vision has now become more than I think we understood it to be, and some of us were part of that process for those 2 days.
I may be totally wrong, but that's how I read it once I got to see that.
That's what it's become, yes, but I don't know that everybody understood that at that time. So now that we've got an understanding that that's, unless I'm wrong, but I was there and that was some confusion.
I would see if these were more 5-year goals, multi-year goals, the objectives would be how you get to those other items that you're talking about. How do you capture equity? How do you capture student achievement? How do you capture anything that you want to focus on from a special needs perspective? I would say you take the appropriate one of the 3 areas that it falls under, because these are umbrellas, and create objectives for the year of what specific area you'd like the district to focus on, and then develop action plans around
And
those objectives.
that's where I think this is so helpful. Yes, Ms. Stratton,
That's how
and
those
then
dots get connected.
Ruth, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't see your hand. Thank you, Kim. I know. I've gotten so accustomed to it. Sorry.
I was just going to comment based on what you were saying, Jesse. Like, I'm following what you're saying and understood it to be, and I'll just use this as an example. I'm not saying this is my opinion either way. This is just an example, but taking the overarching goal of purpose and passion, and then using the example of if the focus was math. Dr. Malash has already outlined number 2, monitoring the academic program with a specific focus on A is the road forward, B, student assessment, C. I mean, to me, if that's what the goal was, we would add E and then slot in if we wanted a specific focus on math. Like, it would make practical sense to me that that's where that would fit.
Exactly what you just said. Purpose and passion would be the overarching. Number 2 would be one of the objectives. And then these would be.
You would slate them in where it
and
would
then-
be
and you would
appropriate.
look for action plans.
Correct.
That give you the evidence that these are being addressed.
Okay.
And what steps you're taking to go forward. That's how I would envision taking this and meshing that all into something that comes back to the board with data.
And then if I'm understanding that not being, and then making sure that it's reasonable, and then you could then insert, this is a 4-year timeline, because something like that, because
Right.
we don't decide how the district gets there. That's, hey, this is what we'd like to see. The district comes back and says, fantastic, we hear you, that's gonna take 4 or 5 years to achieve, and then we can outline the timelines and how we're gonna measure.
This gives the superintendent the ability to tell you, for every item you want focused on, what's the game plan, what's the actions, what's the timeline.
Yep.
Something like, let's say you wanted to address achievement in the math area. He will come back with recommendations on the kind of improvements and the things that we want to do with the target, and that target may be a 3-year target. So his timeline would build an action plan, and some of those items you would see in this year, next year, and the following year. And then next year, when you go through it, he would revise it. He may need to modify some of those, what he planned for that second year, but then you have that multi-year, and you have the measurements and the info, so that throughout this journey, you're getting data that helps you understand how are we approaching the indicators of success that we were hoping to get to. Yes, ma'am.
So then, because I want to make sure I'm not confused. First question, and I know this takes us like way back, like a billion steps to like 6:45, but this says board education goals, but we are doing district goals right now, right?
That's it. When I first saw the title when I went to your website, it said Board of Education Goals. That's why I So we need to have a conversation.
So that,
about
so the first thing, that should say district
it.
goals.
It should say
We
district
come up with
goals.
our, own. Okay, got that clear. Then the second thing is, I kind of was looking, as you're teaching, I'm seeing the same thing of like, these are very excellent, actionable steps. But I think what I'm hearing you say is, for student wellness, we just need one overarching sentence to agree on, because much of what they have here is already the nuts and bolts of the activities or indicators of what needs to get done. We just don't have the one overarching statement about student wellness as our ultimate end goal. But the ones that you have there, those are for the strategic plan and not for the district plan. So are we keeping those two things as two separate things, or are we meshing them to one?
Typically,
Okay.
your districts who have a strategic plan, the strategic plan shapes, it's usually a multi-year plan, because when we do our strategic plans with boards, they're 3 to 5 years, depending on the length of time they want a plan to be developed. Once they develop the plan, they have overarching goals that are established with objectives and actions. Those actions typically spell out the next 5 years. The framework is there for your annual actions, annual goals that you're taking on. So in this case, it's your question of, well, we don't have that overarching statement. I believe, and I could be wrong, like I said, I'm looking at this from my perspective, seeing all these things over the last 2 days for the first time. You have a statement on wellness that says, create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. So if you go to your superintendent's document, the draft document, basically,
Those are the steps that get us there.
yep, I would say, student wellness, that what I just read is the goal statement.
Right.
Then below that, some of these are what I would view as an objective.
As objectives, and then some are action steps.
Then you're gonna build action steps.
Right,
Some of these look like more like action steps.
right.
That should be in the action section of an action plan with staffing, resources, timeline, and then how do I know we've achieved it?
Right. So at this point, then, it seems, and I think Mrs. Arroyo's in agreement, at this point, we need to decide if what was set before as the strategic goals, are we keeping those and meshing the two and trying to find ways to adopt the two, or are you keeping them separate?
Go ahead, Ms. Friedel, and then I'll jump in.
I actually just wanted to make a couple of overall comments, not to answer that question. And I think to that question, that's a board decision. It's not like that's what we all have to come to agreement on about are the strategic goals going to be the district goals, and then work from
Right.
there.
But
So just,
can I just say, typically, your strategic plan helps shape
Right.
your annual goals, because you've got a plan, you've
Yeah.
thought about where you want to go, how do you get there?
no, listen, personally, I think it makes sense, so.
Yeah, and I can tell, at least administratively, we've been operating since February of 2020, that these are the three goals. I
Yeah.
mean, when we do the presentations, even in the updates with Return to Learn, we go over the mission statement, we go over the three goals that guide us. These are our center, this is what directs us, this is what make decisions based on, are these three goals. We took it administratively that was the charge that the board
Yeah.
gave to us, in making that adoption.
Right. I mean, so I think there's a logic to the strategic goals and the district goals being aligned and working from there. But a couple of the thoughts that I have, I guess maybe the things that keep me up at night or wake me up or whatever, is, one of the beautiful things about Cherry Hill is the diversity of the community, and it's diverse in multiple facets. And I think to me, we need to address that diversity beyond just like equity, but students who aren't going to pursue secondary education, how are we making sure that we're giving them a foundation for their success that may not include post-secondary? I think what Mrs. Neary touched on a little bit earlier, Mrs. Stern, when we look at cultural proficiency and equity, that we are inclusive of everything. So, students with disabilities are also looked at in that lens. They're at the table. We're bringing people to the table at, as I like to say, at the appetizer, not at dessert. I also just want to make sure that I'm understanding also that we have timelines. So when I look at what was presented, the draft, and I know we're moving this around, but like when I look at number 2, analyze school start times and end times, that's very open-ended. There's not, and make a recommendation. So what happens with this analysis? And I guess that would come in the timeline that, if that were one of them, one of the.
When I look at not necessarily use that one as an example, to me, it needs more work.
More, yeah, something else
But
there.
For me, looking at it, okay, analyzing start times, convene discussions with students, and what are we trying to accomplish?
Right.
So,
And the last thing is that I think that when we're looking at data, we need to really be looking at subgroups of data. So when I look at, like, monitor the implementation of Care Solace as a district resource, which is a concierge service. I was not at that meeting, so my takeaway is it's almost like a resource and referral line where you can call and get, this is my insurance, and here are providers. So I think it's really important if we're going to be monitoring that, we're monitoring, are our at-promise students using this service? Are they following through? If they're not, is it because they can't get there? Their parents can't take a day off from work? So that we're not just looking at the broader, that the service received 17,000 calls, right? But who's calling and who's going? So I think that comes into like the indicators or so forth, but I think we need to be really clear that we want it broken out so that we're really looking at that 11,000 students. Oh, and I do have one other. Sorry.
I did not know what Care Solace was.
So there you go.
Now that I've heard what it is, typically third-party organizations, part of the conversation is, okay, how do we know this is a worthwhile service to us?
Right.
And what are the metrics that you are going to provide us that we can use?
Right.
And most companies will tell you,
Right.
here are the things that we can provide you,
Right.
the data, and then you as a board say, okay,
Right.
of this data, what are the key indicators that we want to focus on, and get that data on an ongoing basis through the so typically that's part of the contract.
Right.
Or things that you talk about with them, so.
Right.
That's where because I wouldn't know off the top, to your point, yeah, you got so many calls, that's great. But what else is there that we need to know
Right.
if we're going to make this a worthwhile service to the community, to the district? And most companies will be able to give you the
Right.
kind of data that they're sharing with other districts, et cetera.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
And-
but just as a caveat, because we're going to have to talk to Care Solace, I don't know that they're going to tell us the children to contact because it would be a HIPAA violation.
Well, we don't want their names, but we can know, 60% had Medicaid, 40%.
Yeah.
Then you can't.
Yeah, I don't,
So it had to have been in the contract, original
Right.
request, at least that's New Jersey contracting law.
Okay.
But I still think it's a HIPAA violation.
All right, well, so you don't know what you don't know.
If it's disaggregated.
But it still had to have been asked about ahead of time.
In contract law, if it's not in your contract, I guarantee you, if I was running a company and we had negotiated a contract, and you're asking me now for something that I didn't sign up for, I'm gonna tell you I can do it.
Yeah,
And
it's
here's
not a
the
standard
amendment to the contract that we need to do, so that I get those costs covered. Oh, yeah, you're 100% right. Contracting law, the terms and conditions will dictate. If that's not available, you can have that conversation, because if there's data you want, and they can provide, then it's just a matter of, are you willing to pay the cost to get that data.
Right.
We might need another way to measure the effectiveness of the program if it's not getting data from them directly. Right. And maybe the contract is like that, but I know in healthcare sometimes, you can say, well, we also need to report on this to see, I mean, if they want to continue the contract with us, they might be motivated to provide us the information we need, even though that was not originally in, I mean, just.
No,
Right.
I was a Navy contracting officer, so
And let me
I
just,
needed something with an
let me just say too
organization.
that,
I didn't necessarily-
Ms. Mallory is the direct contact with the Care Solis folks, and I don't know that whether we are crossing over into, you guys want data to know is it being effective, and we can talk about that, then we'll go to Ms. Mallory, she'll go with the contact there. We'll, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how deep the
Yeah,
board
I
needs to
didn't,
get
I
into
didn't
other
want to
than
like
saying,
take this
right, we
over,
want
but I
the-
just think like an example for the indicators of success, like 17,000 calls is not necessarily an indicator of success. So,
You as a board, as a board team, you need to discuss what are, in data in general. I tell boards all the time, you need to identify what those key performance indicators are in multiple areas, because you can't watch everything, right?
Right.
You can't monitor everything. What are those key performance indicators that make sense, that if you see it and it's trending in the right direction, you as a board have a good feel that from your having the pulse on the district, that the district is moving in the right direction.
Okay.
But you have to make those decisions.
yep. And, yeah, I'm done, thank you.
Don't get in the weeds too much too, because, Dr. Mello has on here that these are the actionable steps. And so these are the steps that if I'm a building principal, I'm gonna go to these action steps, looking at those 3 bullet goals and saying, what now can my building do? So, I also pulled out that statement as well, because I immediately thought monitor the implementation and utilization of Care Solis as a district resource. But then I would see a principal putting some bullets under that of maybe measuring number of referrals or whatever, but that's not for us to put in here, because that's just too heavy in the weeds, I feel like.
It's a flow down.
Yeah,
The board establishes district goals, and the superintendent flows that down, because those are his goals, right? Flows that down to the rest of the district. And building principals, et cetera, they build goals because they're part of achieving the district goals.
so we would say, hey, we
You don't
want to,
dictate
we
to
want to know
them.
the implementation, utilization, and maybe the results, the efficacy or end result, if we can in some way. Then they can come up with the deeper in the weeds portion of that.
Superintendent's evaluating every one of his team.
Right,
He's
Okay.
establishing goals with them. So, trust me, most superintendents, when they set goals with their staff, they're aligned to the goals that he's being held accountable, because that's what the board is expecting of the district. And then they can evaluate it on their ability to support it.
right.
Each of them.
So for then, for.
That's the how. They're responsible for that how.
Got it. So for us, I guess my question is, again, I kudos to the admin team for putting these, and had I read this one sentence, these are the measurable actions that we're gonna take to achieve the 3 goals. Do we have the 3 statements that were under wellness, passion, and connecting the original 3 statements? Because that's where we would be.
Yes,
The minutes of the strategic
we do.
plan committee, August
Okay.
August 2nd.
Yeah, I
They're
can
listed
send it.
right there.
Were they the memo? Okay.
Ben, did you also have a question? I'm sorry.
Okay, so I wrote a bunch of stuff, just kind of waiting, but I think, so for strategic planning vision, which, if you look at the people assembled in the room, I mean, I think it's different. I think it's different in one sense, but I think they have to align in the other sense. So I think there's this issue, first of all, of nomenclature, right? We need 3, 4, 5 buckets. The question is, how do we define those buckets? You could define student wellness. For instance, we're doing a bond. Why? It works into student wellness.
Right.
But at the same time, I wouldn't use wellness, purpose, and passion and connecting beyond the classrooms to totally orient our discussion or to say these are 3 of 5 buckets that should be there. And I'm going to get to 4 that I think are really good in a second. But I think we need to be bigger, and when I say bigger, I also mean, so I think we need to know, I think we need information that Dr. Malash is our expert from, but we don't have here, and I don't have it all, right? So I'm not from this world, but, what are the macro trends, right? There are trends that are happening nationwide. There are trends probably that are international as well. And how do we marry these trends with what's happening in New Jersey and in Cherry Hill? COVID happened. That is a massive, major disruption to the educational community, at least nationwide and beyond. What does that mean? A lot of people are thinking a lot of great things. The person in this room who knows the most about that is Dr. Malash. And I think that why, right, that Start With Why TED Talk we've all watched, it's critical. Right? If you ask me about nonprofit, which is what I work in, I could tell you that, 35 to 40% of nonprofits weren't coming back. That creates a major disruption in the space. That means there's a lot of people in greater need potentially that have a lot fewer. But those pieces are critical when we're thinking about board level goals. Okay, moving on. A sense of the workflow. We entrust, over 1,000 people to do the work that we set in motion. What is the workflow? And I think the other piece with that when we get into the action plan is, can this board commit to that workflow? It doesn't make sense to say, let's do boundary readjustment, let's go out for the bond, if we're not going to actually support that work. I think part of this is kind of on us to say, what would it mean for us to support it? I think to me there's safety in our current draft goals that's too safe. Like, we need to be a little bit, I think, aggressive and figure out as a board, what can we commit to? Can we commit to a bond? I can. I think this board can. Can we commit to this boundary readjustment? I can, and I believe the board can. I think there's a certain statement here that's not just on our administrators, it's on this team piece to say, this is what we're going forward with. It's not a checkbox. It's not a workflow. It's not a bunch of tasks. We're doing this. We're doing this because it's right. It doesn't always have to be popular. And, we'll try to sell it to you, or we'll tell you why we're doing it and why it's right, even though you're not on board, whatever it is. KPIs, I think, are absolutely critical, and I think defining them is critical. For instance, okay, we're going to get a no place for hate designation. Why? And not even why, like maybe no place for hate. I don't think there's anyone on the board that's against that, but is the work worth that particular designation? There's a piece on here about implementing the African American history class, but I have every belief that we'll do that. I mean, to me, that was a board goal last year, absolutely appropriate.
We approved it.
This year, and to put it into motion, there's a trust that's missing here that I have in our administrators. I know they can get a wellness committee together. I know they can do it well. I know they can convene it and bring back good stuff, but I don't want to see that here. If I had to pick four, my closing thought, I know I've spoken too much. My closing thought is this: if I had to do 4 buckets, and I didn't have this in front of me, I would say there's macro district structure pieces that we must address. To me, it is a facility future that includes potential bond work, that includes what we do with cap reserve, that includes what we do in the course of business. There is boundary adjustment and equity considerations. That's a major load of work that we've asked in many ways. We need to be, I think, explicit about that and move forward with that. Some kind of recommendations, something that macro shifts the way this district is oriented to be better, not just to be different, not to create disruption, but because we believe as a board team that that's better. That's number one. Number 2, student achievement, right? How many times can Mr. Adams say? Student achievement's critical. We all know it. Our administrators know it. We all know it. We've got to do more than know it. What does it mean? Where do we baseline it? I think an issue we're going to have if we're talking about a 10% here or a 5% there is with what baseline? Where do we go? Where are we? Where does the data take us in something that we can support as an appropriate KPI? And that may not be a paper and pencil test. And that may not be summative, and I'm speaking in language I don't know, but I don't know what it is, but just something that's real and solid and that we can all get behind and say, this is how we measure student achievement, this is why we do it, it's why it's important, and we're going to continue to talk about it. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. It's never going to be one or the other, but here's the nuance, here's who's maybe getting left behind, here's how we can identify it. All right, so that was 2. Number 3, I just don't believe that COVID is going to be anything more than a 5 to 10 year level disruption. how does it affect us? This is the biggest thing that's happened. A lot of people talk about populational pieces, right? ELL students, students with special needs, students of color, students for whom there's a digital divide issue, or whatever it is. How do we identify those guys, but how do we also have that be individualized? There are plenty of ELL students that are doing amazing. Maybe there are, students with special needs that this has been an unbelievable opportunity. Great. There has to be some kind of individual piece, and we don't track it as a board individually, but how do we study this as a group? And I think, for me, student wellness fits into this. The isolation, the depression, the documented studies, children have not interacted in what we would consider a normal way for a long time. You get them back together, it's very different. So I think, and we're talking about care souls, whatever the mechanisms, what's important, how do we do this, how do we intervene, how do we track it, how do we define success, and then how do we deliver it? And then I think for me, the fourth would be, world-class experiences. Let's be amazing at stuff, right? We've got like national and internationally recognized students. Let's do more of that. And how do we make sure every student has a pathway, right? We talked about esports is great. Esports, one of the things about is students with special needs can participate fully in that, right? You try to get people into robotics and sports, whatever it is, whatever the things are, all these great things. And then I think, I don't know, this sounds a little callous when I say it, but like we have a product, right? We have these amazing, wonderful students. They've got different pathways for success, vocational, military, they're going to college, they're going to be entrepreneurs and develop apps in the gig economy. I don't know what any of that means, but we want to make sure that we're great at that, right? That in the next step that they take from our doors, that they're amazing. So these are the four I could really, get behind. I think there's baselining to be done, but, and all of what's in the draft, all this could fit in there. But I just think the bucketing, it's more important than I think maybe we give it credit for sometimes. And so, okay, that was a lot, sorry.
So I have a couple of comments. So I
Mrs.
think.
Neary, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to point out, board members, we're back to recording our board meetings in the back. So please, when you're speaking, make sure the microphone is close and that you're speaking into the microphone so that they can hear it, whoever might be watching it from home. Thank you.
Thanks. So I think for clarification for Corinne, the way I see those 3 strategic planning goals are like the compass. And everything should flow up to that somehow. And then we have the district goals. Some could be annual, some could carry over longer. For me, this all makes sense. It sounds silly, but as I look at this document, this is very clean. If you can get it into this, you can action it, you can measure it. We understand what the measures are before you get to the end of the year. Because if we're looking at it and we don't know the measure till we're rating it, that somehow does not seem fair. And we didn't all align on, well, what is that measure until we're measuring it. So for me, it's got to work in this form. This makes, and it's like, keep it simple, stupid. Like, it's simple. And I think we're starting to shake out what that framework is and what's important. And some of it is already here in some objectives, some actionable steps. I think some of it's here. And then we're seeing what may not be clearly articulated, we're putting there. At least how I see it shaking out right now. That's what I'm seeing.
Good. Sorry, Ms. Sugars. I think my confusion was I originally looked at this and was like, oh, these are not goals in here, and because they don't have blah, blah, blah. So that's why I was kind of thinking the same thing that Mrs. Stern was thinking. And so I had pulled out stuff like, well, where's the measurement part of it? But now that I'm like, oh, Corinne, you should have read this, first of all, because it says these are actions. And now the statements make sense. And so now I get more of why you said you're going to go back and come back to us with with whatever, we come from after we run through this plan as a team. So it makes a little bit more sense to me now. So thank you.
I will come back with goal statements if necessary, because right now, the way this is flowing, these are your goal statements for each of those areas. So that's why I think there was a conversation of strategic plan? Does this drive our annual? It should align. Is this the board's desire to keep these as the overarching goal statement, and then utilizing objectives to pull this information into what you want to focus on an annual basis?
I think
To Ben's
so.
point, the buckets, all of these could be a bucket. But the idea is that every one of these could be a specific objective under one of these three areas. And then the objectives and actions would be pulled from this and added to come up with the action plans on every one for the current year of all the things that you're going to do. And you would have the indicators of success, which would represent the data that you should be getting to know that you're achieving what everybody was planning to do. Yes.
Thank you, Jesse. I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone but myself, but it sounds like we could be aligned on the goal statement, and based on what I'm hearing from various board members, where I think we still need some work is, it sounds like some of the items, some of the board members want to strike, and then there are some items that you've whiteboarded that need to be added into the various buckets. That's going to take some time that I don't know that we would maybe get done tonight. So then from a next steps perspective, is that like we now digest the information and then send like the recommendations back to administration on, I really like this is something we'd like to take off of the plate of administration because it's something that, you know, maybe perhaps we'd rather see the focus on ABC that we kind of discussed at the meeting. And then, because that's where I think we need to get alignment as a board is on these actionable steps. But I do get the sense that everybody is aligned on those are the goal statements. It's just kind of these actionable steps.
Yeah, that's number one. We got to get to the point that what are your goal statements?
Okay.
And if everybody's comfortable with these three as the overarching goal statements, then we're beyond the goal statements. You're exactly right. We are now looking at all these different elements that folks have brought up as to.
Wait, can we be clear though? Because I don't think it is, and I think we do need to
Go ahead.
poll, right?
All right.
So if you're saying that then, and we use this as the guide,
Yeah.
right? The three overarching goal statements is a sheet of each, right? On this,
At least one.
right? And then some of those items that we've whiteboarded
Objective.
flow onto here.
Objective, if you see on that chart, it says district goal,
Yes,
and right underneath it says objective.
and those become your
These-
objectives.
These are the different items that you have been throwing out, that you guys will decide if that's where you're going, some of the focus areas, some of the objectives that you want to focus on, and which of the three does it fit under? So you could have one sheet with the goal statement, with the facilities infrastructure objective. Another sheet with the same goal statement and a non-college bound student objective. So you would have a sheet with an objective if there are specific focus areas that you want the administration to be working on.
Okay,
To Ruth's point, these are ideas that you've thrown out there for consideration. My recommendation would be to send the list back to the superintendent to look at it against those three goal statements to say, what would he be recommending from objectives to focus on, and bring that back to you. Once you agree, because you don't want him spinning his wheels, putting action plans on objectives if you're not aligned on it. So once you
Right.
have alignment on the objectives and you're in agreement, you're already in agreement with the goal statement, I think. Once you've identified off of your list, what are those focus areas you want to, for this year, you want on the list to be worked?
Can I ask a question?
One second, those objectives then, and you get agreement, he can now build the action plans and come back to you with the whole enchilada that you guys can discuss, tweak, modify, and ultimately take to that September board meeting. Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember when we decided that the strategic goals were our district goals right now.
Okay.
So I'm kind of in a space where.
We haven't, we need to
Okay,
decide
so that's
that.
what I asked earlier, and we
Yes.
kept going with the conversation. So we need to stop and
Yes.
start and have that conversation. So the strategic goals, how I see it, is like, these are my vision for a 3-year plan. Like, in my vision, like, this is what's happening, right? Like, this is what I want to see happen in the district. Every year, I have to come up with goals to get there. And then at the end of that year, I measure how far we've gotten towards that vision. So they don't necessarily have to be the 3 vision statements that are in the strategic goals, but they have to align with them. Does that make, that's how
That
I'm
doesn't
seeing
make-
this.
That's how I see it,
That does
Rosie.
make sense. You can use the strategic plan, those 3 overarching, as your North Star.
That's how I
Right?
see it personally.
And then you can say, okay, this year, we're interested in doing something as it relates to special needs. And you write a goal, a district goal for the year aligned to one of those 3 items off your strategic plan as the goal statement. And then from there, you start to develop, the staff, superintendent will develop objectives and actions around that, whatever that goal statement is, as it relates to, I'm using special needs as an example. That is another way to do it. What I was saying, what I'm seeing, and what I see here, this is directly tied to those 3 goal statements, and if that's the desire, what I'm saying is you don't have to create a goal statement, but if it's, you want to keep the strategic plan as the North Star, and you say, okay, we are going to identify 3 or 4 buckets that we're going to focus on this year, you'll build, in fact, I would build a goal statement for that focus area, and then you would have that as your base to work with. You'd wordsmith it, play with it. When you finally are in agreement, then superintendent now takes it, and he now puts objectives to that and actions. So there's a couple ways to do it. To your point, step 1, we need to identify, are we using the strategic plan, those 3 items as the goals, or are you looking to keep it as a North Star and create unique, well, I won't say unique, but goals tied to the strategic plan areas for the year that we're working in. So that's something the board has to decide on so that we know which way to go.
So let's do it like this. Let's do a show of hands, who wants to remain with it as the North Star versus it becomes the goals, right? So if it's a North Star, then we're going to build out the goals, and we've whiteboarded. Some of it is here, it's just as the high level versus this is already objectives and action plans minus some of the time bound. If we stay with the North Star, it all still has to meet that vision, and you should be able to articulate back to it. The other is, those are your goal statements, but then my fear would be you're going to lose sight of some of this under that. You're not going to hit some of it. So for me, I like the idea of keeping it as a North Star because that's what I always understood it was supposed to be, the guiding principles. The other is we use it as the goal statements. So,
And in that second example, using it as the goal statements, your objectives become these things that you want to focus on each year within the appropriate bucket. So it's one way or the other. You're
so.
still going to have, some of these could end up being that goal statement and then objectives built around those and actions. Or the other way would be the 3, and then one of these, several of these would become the individual objectives. So there's 2 ways to skin the cat. It's just a matter of which way
Yeah,
the board
and I
wants to go.
think both ways could work. We just have to be intentional on how we explain and break out the objectives and the activities and the measurements at the end. So we all have to, so either way makes sense. I just needed to understand where we were at right now.
So then who wants to have them as the North Star? Okay, and who wants to have them as, I can't see everybody, I'm too short.
So you have Miriam,
Okay.
Rosie, and Ben, and you raised your hand.
Okay, okay. Okay. The guiding principles. They're the strategic vision.
Right, and then the goals.
Right.
I just want to make sure everybody's right.
So then we're split, so that doesn't help.
Just to clarify, I guess if we have it as the North Star and not as the district goal as well, like, I guess the only thing, in the way I'm kind of envisioning is that we would have to know the action steps. Like, we would have to then table what the goal is, understand what those action steps are to almost write the goal. I just feel like we're doing it backwards, because we would have to collaboratively right now determine what is our goal on student wellness. We would have to know that tonight, and I don't feel that we would be aligned as a goal tonight to be able to say this is what our goal is, because I just don't feel that we're aligned enough to say this is what our goal is in student wellness. Or this is, as a board, this is what we want to focus on in student wellness. This is what we want to focus on in purpose and passion, and this is what we want to focus on in connecting beyond the classroom. Like, I don't know that we are aligned tonight on a board to be able to agree to then write the goal statement. That's my, to Rosie's point, objectively, you can get to the end line, but I don't know that we are aligned as a board at all right now for what those objectives are in each one of those buckets to agree to what those goal statements would be, which is why I'm hesitant to say, to go that way, at least using the statements that we already have. To me, it's broad enough, and then we accomplish what we are trying to do by saying, we can get that narrow focus with the objectives as a board later.
By making these objectives.
Right. That's how I'm just looking at it, because I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that it takes us some time as a board to marinate on information and then come to an agreement. So that's where I'm looking at this, through the lens of that.
I'm kind of there too, like because you can really get to it both ways, and I've seen it happen both ways. I just want to be clear on how, when we decide or have those both options, like, we know what we're all agreeing to.
Yeah, intentional.
Yeah, very intentional, focused, measured, outcome-based.
Carol, I think you also had a comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. When I think about it, and what Rosie, was talking about, it can be done, in my mind, both ways. And we get there and we get the same results in the end. I like to do things more simply. And what we've been doing over the past year and a half since we implemented these strategic goals is that our administrators, and I'm talking about the building administrators leading their schools, have been using these strategic goals to guide what they do. And we've been using them as well. We've been using them in our committee meetings. Each of our items in the committee looks at each one of these strategic goals. Where does it fit in? It's a part of it. So we can do it the way Rosie has suggested. In my mind, that adds another step, another layer to what we're doing. But using Laurie's words, it's still the North Star. It's still our North Star, whether we have just the strategic goals and then we have other goals underneath of them for this year, or if we have the strategic goals and they are our goals, and then we have the objectives of what we're going to do this year. We're still setting out what we're doing. We're using, in my mind, we're using different terms for the same thing. And in one scenario, we have an extra layer, if you will. And I think both will work. My preference is always to do things as simply as we can for brevity and for understanding in the community. We are a large district with a lot of employees, a lot of families, and a lot of people who are involved in our district. So I think, in my mind, not adding another layer would be helpful to have everybody understand what we're doing and get on board with it. Just my thought process, and I know others, think differently, feel a little differently, and I get that too. I think we can do it either way. That would just be my personal preference.
Okay. Miriam?
So I definitely agree with the idea of keeping it as simple as possible, which may surprise people because I know it's not always my process, but I agree. I think for me, the idea of why I voted to go with like goal setting is I just think the strategic vision is so big. And I think one of the things that we have voiced, and I think we're mostly aligned on as an entire board, and I don't want to speak for the entire board, but that's what I've heard throughout, is we want to make more progress. It's a frustration for us as a board that we want to be able to make more progress. And so to me, having a defined goal is is chunking it down and then chunking it further. I think you can do that, and I don't see that as complicating it. I see that as kind of giving us a more, chunking. To me, where I think we need to look at alignment is what are we trying, to use Ben's term, are we all agreeing on the buckets? Because the buckets are not under, they're not under the vision, right? They're a little bit, well, I see them as smaller than the vision. That's where my thought process is.
So Jesse, could you help us then if we use the vision, those three goals, right, as the vision, those three vision statements as the goals, and then some of the items that we've whiteboarded, so to speak, as the objectives, so that we could see that? Because I'll be honest, that's my fear, in that we fall back to those, although everything we speak to aligns to it, that we lose sight of some of this, because when we started that process, wasn't clear to me that we were marrying them year over year as our goals. It was guiding principles, and that made sense to me at the time. So I'm okay doing that. I want to see what it looks like, so that we don't lose sight of those items and that they kind of just disappear in a lot of articulation.
I think this document, though, is going to be helpful for making sure that we don't do that.
Hugely
Yeah, so,
helpful. I like
there's-
this.
And if we stick to this formatting and this process, there's no way, unless we fail to do our role, to lose sight of this, right? So the expectation now is to hold ourselves accountable, to be able to stick to this measurement plan. And if we do it that way, either way can work. We just have to make sure that these buckets, and I agree with the ones Ben pointed out as well, are outlined, and there's action steps. And some of the action steps actually fit in some of those buckets that are outlined here, right? I just needed to be clear, because all I do on a day-to-day is strategic planning, and we were
Right.
kind of all over the place. So I needed to kind of regroup what we were talking about. This in and of itself is going to help that process.
So what's the next step then, Jesse? Who takes that next step, right?
What I've listened to, and I understand, we're going to take the three strategic plan goals, for lack of a better term. They are going to be overarching as your goals each year. And we're going to take your objectives for each of those will be from these different areas of focus that folks have brought up as potential focus areas for the current year. So what I can do is I'll take that document, and I'll take this list, and I'll determine where I think they fall, and I'll create an objective for each one of these. You may use some of them, none of them, you may come up with your own, but I'll at least make an attempt to create an objective around these different areas for and put it underneath the appropriate goal area that I believe it falls, and I'll return all of those, whatever number of sheets that comes out to be. I'll return that to you and the superintendent, and you can share that with the board, and you at least have a starting point to play
Okay.
with.
Yeah, that's great.
So can I just,
A
so.
couple of hands went up, so.
I'm sorry, just, so, what I think I heard before, though, was, so if we have the goal, the purpose and passion would be one of the goals. Develop highly engaged learner-centered experience within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. So there's the goal, and then we can have an objective. So the objective from that board could be,
You could have multiple objectives.
right, so one of the objectives could be to provide opportunities for all students to engage in activities, experiences that will put them on the path for future success in business, higher education, whatever.
In all walks of life,
Right,
including the non-college.
right, exactly, military's there.
Yep.
But then we could have another objective.
Yep.
So we still have the goal and another objective from that bucket. And
Yes.
that would look the same for connecting beyond our classroom and for
Right.
student wellness.
We always tell folks, we tell superintendents, when you're developing, you're taking your goal and establishing objectives, we recommend, 4 is probably a good set of objectives. In your case, it would be 4 areas under each one of those that you would want the district to look at. Superintendent would then take those and create action plans around all those. You would all have a conversation and discuss. Some of those may stay, some of that stuff may go, you may pare it down, but in the end, you will have agreed to, you have your overarching goal, you have the specific areas of focus through your objectives that you're looking at,
Right.
and action plans that have been developed, and you're all on the same page with what you're approving, and that's what you run to for the year
Right.
that's in front of you.
And then, real quick, and then, so when the objectives are done, the work that Dr. Malash and the team have done on this document, in some of the cases, would fall into what's already here for major activities. So it's kind of
He would take the work they've already done.
Right. And they might have to edit,
I
adjust.
guarantee you,
but
based on
it's-
ever the conversations, there's gonna be additional stuff that he's gonna put together in the action plans. But yes, there's a lot of action steps here that he's going to use to fit the area that, under each of these 3, that it focuses on.
Jesse, let me just clarify. So the board adopts goals, right? The board, and Paul, the board's not developing action plans and then adopting action plans.
You're developing the action plans, they're approving the
Right, just,
action plans.
yeah, just want to make sure that there's,
Yes.
we've gone lots of bucket discussion and going around.
Yeah,
Just
we
wanna
don't
make
wanna
sure
do
there's-
that
there's-
part.
There's clarity on.
Yeah, the
No.
goal, basically, because you've all stated you're gonna use those 3 goals, they're established. What you're saying, what you're asking for are the objectives each year to reflect buckets or things that you want the district to.
So that was my concern, is that within our role, or now, is that no longer us because we decided on the other 3 goals, we're done?
In theory.
Because that's where I'm concerned in losing sight of
In theory, I would
that.
say yes, but because you are using those strategic plan goals, these objectives are actually your what that
Okay.
you want the district to focus on. And as I said, there's a lot of them here. I'm going to build objectives
Okay,
that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to have 12 objectives. You may all say after you get through after your superintendent takes a look at them, you may say, we're not going to have 12, we're going to have 6.
Right.
Or whatever. And then once you settle on those objectives, the what you want the district to focus on, the superintendent will take those objectives, they're under the overarching goal, and he will create action plans and bring those back to you. And what my recommendation is, the action plans are part of the goal. So, and the objectives. My recommendation is you're approving the whole package. Guys, this is what we're focusing on and approving for in each of these 3 areas for the year. Once the superintendent has given you everything and you're in agreement with what actions he's planning to take. And that's what you then measure yourselves against.
Okay,
Sorry, Dr. Malash. So does that fit for when we're kind of defining, kind of we're the what, you're the how, the objectives? Is that fit with your view? Does it align with your view? Because if not, I think we have to know that.
Yeah, I mean, the objectives in the action plan, there absolutely is a role in a discussion we're going to have with the board. There's a team of experts and professionals with whom I'm working at the superintendent's council level, building principals, administrators, counselors, that kind of stuff. Those are people that I will rely on as we develop those action plans. I don't know that I see it the same way as and if, and we can certainly talk about what does it look like. My other concern with doing it is school opens 5.5 weeks from now, right? And time frame wise, this will not be discussed at the board meeting on Tuesday night. We have a board meeting on the 24th, and then the first board meeting in September is the 14th. We didn't adopt board goals until the 27th of October last year. That's late. Because again, I've got 19 schools, 11,000 kids, all these people they've started, and then in the beginning of November for me to turn around and say, I need you to be doing this, it becomes a challenge. I don't have any problem with doing the action plans. We've done SMART goals for years. It's what we do with all the building administrators. It's how we structure, in terms of what goes on. And I think there's got to be discussion with the board about this is what the action plan is. I will tell you, after, identification or agreement from the board, and I think there's a lot that goes back and forth, I do think that some of it is a semantic discussion about whether it's a North Star or whether there's under goals that, because that go through. And I'm good either way. It just that we need to have them defined, and if there are objectives that the board wants us to work on, we need to know what they are. You know what I mean? There's got to be clarity in that. We can't build an effective action plan without knowing. It's like somebody saying, draw me a picture of a pretty dog. Well, unless I know what you find attractive in an animal, I can't draw a picture of a pretty dog that everybody's going to agree on. And I can keep doing it and keep saying, nope, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I'm like, am I getting closer? Or, I'm not sure what the criteria are. So the biggest thing that we need administratively are, what are those objectives that you want us to hit? I don't know that and again, the draft and the statements that are in here, there are absolutely a lot of objectives because of the structure of how we looked at them as goals. There's not time in there. There's not outcomes. There's, not that kind of stuff. Fleshing that part out, certainly can be done, and identifying with this list and putting those together absolutely can be done. I think the other hard part with goals is there is a lot that goes on in the school district. Everything that goes on cannot be listed within the goals, right? Because if everything is that which is front-facing and center, and this is what our primary focus and attention's on, that it just all gets lost in terms of what's there. There are big expectations for the work that is currently going on. At the 5 committee meetings over the last 2 nights, we talked about a lot of activities and a lot of goals, literally goals, that we want to accomplish during the course of this year. Those absolutely need to be embedded in what we are doing. Those action steps for, and you guys have talked about them, the organization of the school district and, that kind of stuff. Those have to be a part of what's here and should be. Those are significant steps in what's there. The action plan will certainly look different, than it is. But no, I don't see that as much as all of that being put together in a packet and the board adopting. Can we put the actions, we can put the goals and the action steps, all that can go up on the website, but I think there's a time frame piece that we need to look at in terms of what's there. There's been good feedback tonight. This is the first real feedback we've gotten, on goals and planning for this academic year, which I think is critical as well.
That was going to be my question, Dr. Malash, is do you have enough feedback from tonight to make any adjustments or tweaks to things, or do you feel like you still need more from us? Because that's where I don't want us to be a board that's not giving you what you need and just saying, oh, this is not right, go do it again.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Ms. Elmer Stratton, and I think that that's where, as Mr. Adams has written this stuff down, and we take that feedback, I think that's where it's so critically important that the board members and you all, for the most part, have been expressive tonight to get that up on that paper, because then the other piece is, Jesse's going to Mr. Adams is going to turn around, he's going to work on this, he's going to send it back to us, we're going to put this into a format, and it's going to go out to the full board. The challenge will become, the next time we have this discussion, probably on the 24th or, the 14th of September, whenever it is, to say, well, I think we should add this, or I think we should do this. We can add to it all the time, but I think right now, it needs, there needs to be a cut, in terms of what we're planning and what we're going to do. So I would say if you have stuff to add, make sure you let Mr. Adams know.
Yeah, and I will tell you, you can't boil the ocean. All right, you got to do it one pot at a time, and this is putting together the pots that you're going to try to boil. I'm sorry, hands keep going.
So I was going to kind of ask the same questions that Mrs. Stratton had asked too, kind of along that same line about feedback, but mine's just a little bit different. Dr. Malash, we have everything on the board of like the asks from the board as far as like what we want added, but there was also a lot of comments that Jesse didn't capture in regards to like what wasn't important, and so that we wanted to remove, because I mean, just going over these drafts, I mean, there's already 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, I think we're working with 12 objections right now, and then there's another 12. Like, we can't have a plan with 24 objections. So I just wanted to make sure you had captured the information of like what the board had said was not important, so that we could remove it, because going back to what we'd gone over, it has to be achievable in a time frame of a year.
It does, and honestly, in a time frame as we talked, as the board and I talked in the spring, a time frame that's achievable by April.
Yeah.
Really in terms of what we looked at.
Well, we could have longer term.
But you could have longer.
We could absolutely
Yeah.
have multiple years.
Yeah, we just have
for
to
sure.
make that clear.
The
Right.
timelines that your superintendent will set will determine when in this year or an out year, certain things.
Right, we could, but there were just some things that board members were like, that just shouldn't be a goal. We just expected, that's just part of what we thought should just be day to day. So I just want to make sure you had captured that, because it hasn't been captured on the whiteboard.
Yeah, I think I captured some, again, the more the more that people can provide feedback, even if it's to take the document, and send it back.
Okay.
And send it back and say, here's what I think should be highlighted, or, as Jesse's working, as Mr. Adams is working on this, and these things, make sure that these make it through, and these I don't think need to be listed, that's ideal as well, because then we can put it together in a chart, and, and not by name, but, here we received this back from 9 board members, and, board member A said, highlight these, remove these, board member B, so that it's clear, so everybody can take a look and see, this is what the feedback is that's been provided.
Okay, so maybe that's like a good idea now that we've had all the feedback and the great training. We can take this document, mark it up, and then send it to you with just comments and additional thoughts.
Yeah, because he is looking for feedback on that.
Well,
Joe.
before we mark that up, though, we want to get to this. So
No,
are we just going to redline this
No,
only?
this is telling him what we don't
Okay.
think
Is
needs
important.
to be
Is important.
in this. So
Okay.
Joe, give us a deadline. When do you,
Yeah.
when do you need this by?
Yeah, when would you like that back by, any?
I would say the sooner the better. I mean, Jesse, what's your time frame looking at?
Well, I'm going to try within the next couple of days to get you the draft of what I have so that you're ready to work.
So today's Wednesday. Can everybody do it by Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what do you prefer, Joe? Would you prefer
I was
one
just gonna
document, or would you
scan it and
prefer to
send it.
see?
So, I mean, ideally, Mrs. Cohen will be collating it all, putting it all together. I mean, I have staff, I mean, there's staff support to be able to do that. If Lori or Kim want to put it all together and do that, they certainly are welcome to do that.
I'm just thinking how other, in the past, sometimes we've sent everything to you, but whatever works, I'm just.
Can we make it Sunday?
Honestly, you can make it Monday. Nothing's going to happen if you send it
I'm
Saturday
being
or
honest.
Sunday.
I'm being honest.
That's
Yeah, nothing's
fine.
going to happen.
But,
And honestly, with the board meeting, we have a board meeting on Tuesday
Right.
evening. We've got presentations, there's a number of things that are going on. So ostensibly, really nothing until Wednesday morning, we'll probably be done with it. You know, it'll be more end of next week work
so
that'll take
can
place.
Janet collate that then? Because
She can.
otherwise,
Yes.
I would
Yeah, 'cause I can schedule-
kindly let the audience member know that I'm out of pocket for another week.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, we have staff that's there to take advantage of doing that.
So I just want to make sure, I don't think I heard the answer. Did you want each person to send their individual comments to your office?
Yes.
And then they'll go from there?
Right, so,
Not
and for the board members, just follow the same practice you do in anything that you send to me, copy me, Janet, Lori, certainly copy Kim, you know, but Lori for sure, make that the board president is copied.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to go back to the whiteboard. And just to clarify, so one of the struggles I've had, and I don't know, this is a little bit in the granular here, but the math achievement, again, we're in a weird time, and I know it's not up to us to decide how we're going to measure it, but I think we all need to know that there's a data expectation we're getting to, A, and B, it previously has been a board goal for years to close the achievement gap with math, and it hasn't happened. And I don't know what I can do. It's, again, my first time doing this. Like, I don't know what I could add in terms of just helping to distill it down a little bit more clearly, that, you know, what's realistic to expect. So I just need a little guidance on that.
What
Can I,
What will typically take place is, when it comes to the achievement gap, math, scores, ELA, et cetera, that's going to be a board desire to improve in those areas. That's the person who's going to tell you and make a recommendation to you that, in this area, here's my recommended improvement for this year, and these are the actions that we're going to take to try and achieve that. He will make a recommendation to you. You should not be pulling a number out of the air and say, we want 20% improvement. He's going to say, based on data, based on information, based on discussions with his staff, he'll say, okay, the board is looking for an improvement in this area. What's realistic? What can we do? And then he'll come back with his recommendation, and then you'll have the metric that you need to measure. And it's, you know, and so then, once that's done, then you've got a baseline that you're working from. So as you get through this year, he'll report on the results, and then the board may say, we want to continue. He'll come back with a new recommendation on what's the next increment that we think we can improve on. But yeah, you're not going to be able to figure out what a reasonable.
Right.
You're going to rely on, here's what we're looking for overall. He'll come back with specifics on what he thinks he can try to do with this district.
And then just, we have a plan for us all giving feedback on this. And we're also going to work on I don't have it, I'm sorry. Too many papers. We're all going to then also, I guess, timeline, I'm just trying to figure out as well, like.
I'm going to
You're gonna
provide
Okay,
a goal statement and objective sheet
okay.
I'm going to take all these and in looking at some of these, I think there's a dozen here. It may be less than a dozen because some of these fit with each other. But I'll work that. But ultimately, I will give you a draft to work from to the superintendent and the board president, who will provide that all to you. And this, basically your piece will be this upper portion, getting to that agreement of the objectives, because that's what he needs to know. This is what you want him to focus on. And then, once you guys you'll have that discussion, get to agreement. And like I said, there may be 10, It may go to 8, but once you get to the magic number of objectives under each one of your 3 goal areas, he will then do the hard work of putting the action plans together and then ultimately come back to you with the full package. Here it is, here's what we're going to do this year.
So to Dr. Malash's point, out of respect for not waiting till October, like, so I guess do you have a suggested timeline in terms of you get that to us, we work on it,
Yeah, I'm going to get this back to you by this weekend, because I need to get that in your hands. At that point, you guys need to decide what your timeline is. If your goal is to be able to approve a goal, objectives, and action plan complete by your September meeting, you have to figure out as a board how you're going to get there. You know, I can't tell you how your schedules work and what you can do, but you may need a special meeting just to focus on that, but that's something you have to decide as a group once you get to work.
In the timeframes with the information being shared, right, Mr. Adam gets it to us, you guys provide the feedback, we can put stuff together, there certainly can be additional discussion. We have the September cycle of committee meetings are on Monday, August 30th and Tuesday, August 31st. So ideally, we will have a draft for Monday, August 30th and Tuesday, August 31st to discuss at committee meetings. There are then 2 weeks before we have the work session because of Labor Day holiday and then Rosh Hashanah. So the September work session is on the 14th of September. Ideally, in the special action section of the September 14th board meeting, which at that point will be the 4th day of the academic year, would be an ideal time to have the board goals adopted. But that means that people need to be within their timeframes, people need to be able to provide that feedback, because if not, then we have to move forward, and without providing it, then there's a certain level of acquiescence or consent to say, all right, you know, I'm good with where you are going, but then to provide the discussion and in the committees to have the discussion so that a final draft can be submitted and sent out to people for any further review, and then discuss it, you know, for adoption on the 14th of September. We should be able to fit it within that time frame. I believe that that's doable, you know, in terms of where we are.
I think, you know, the superintendent's saying it's basically, it can happen, but it's a team effort.
It's aggressive but achievable, so yeah, we'll just have to stay on top of it and give the feedback. Well, this was really helpful, Jesse, because we have not done this activity in this fashion before.
As you all have been talking and thinking, is there anything else you want me to throw up on the list before I put it
Corinne
into
has one.
my pouch?
And in reference to the, just making me think about the hiring and the equity surrounding that. I know we have some things in here speaking to diversity in terms of how we promote, but if we could maybe do something that speaks to how we recruit or obtain or even train. I know we have maybe like training future in district or encouraging, or if we're doing any type of mentoring programs, you know, that can be utilized as a retention opportunity, something like that, that increases our diversity, or like speaking to our connection with Rowan University, how is that helping us or something? I don't know. I don't want to get in the weeds, but I just would love to see something there on that.
I've got the overarching thought there. I'll build an objective.
Okay, and then my other thing was, in terms of, again, what cultural proficiency and equity, I love the anti-bias training with the all-district staff. I think that's going to be awesome, but can we make sure that that is very clear and inclusive, that that's including teaching and non-teaching staff? I know that's like super specific, but like what does that mean for district staff? Are we talking about our officers or whatnot and all of that as well? Just making sure it's all encompassing. And then.
I'm not sure how to capture that thought.
It means everybody.
Everybody, okay.
All staff.
Just making sure.
So
That was it. And then I'll put my other feedback on here, but I did want to say to the administrator, thank you for working on this. We understand you got like 999 other things right now, so we appreciate the detail, so.
Carol? Oh.
Real quick, and I apologize, I'm rather nearsighted even with my glasses, so I'm having a hard time reading the chart, and I don't remember if we put down infrastructure and the bond referendum. That's on there as well.
This first one would involve facilities, infrastructure,
Okay.
boundary work, all under that umbrella.
Did you get
Thank you.
ADA in there? Because it comes up and we talk about it a lot, and I think we should capture it. The ADA compliance. So under infrastructure. Facilities, yeah.
I got you.
Thanks. Were there any last comments? I know we're way
Yeah.
over.
I have one.
Rosie and then Miriam.
Expansion of, I don't know if you can, if we can put this on there, but expansion of like aftercare and before care, like SAC. Is that something that we talk about? No? No?
I'm not sure which one.
No?
A goal, to expand before care and after
Yeah.
care?
Would that be an objective in
Is that-
student well?
I don't know, I'm asking.
It could certainly be included in the discussion as an objective. I think
Is it, what do we specifically talk about? Before school, after school care for students?
Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking that may be an item under staff and student wellness kind of activities, right? As an action of expanding a program, et cetera. But it could be its own objective too, so, do you want me to put it up there and then you guys deal with it?
You can put it on.
Yeah, I mean.
We can take a look and see if it fits or what it does.
Oh, Mrs. Weddington has her
Lori, I
hand up.
just,
No problem.
I just want to clarify, do you mean at more sites or additional hours, or I'm not sure what it's saying. I guess like more to be able to put size-wise, like tactic-wise, like third or so. I don't know what the sites look like, I just know, where that sometimes there's cut off at the week or something like that, so.
I'm wondering if this is, it's a topic that maybe we can explore at one of the committee meetings. What's happening now? What do we do? What do we serve? And then that could address your questions. Do we need to do more? And what would that look like? Maybe that's a way to go.
I'll create an objective, and then, like I said, as you work through the process, it may fall into an action, it may go to a committee. Like I said, just because it's here, it may not necessarily end up being, you all will decide what the final product actually looks like.
Okay, Miriam.
Just something that came up at our committee meeting that Rosie, you were really touching on, and I was also was in support of, just a discussion of approaching our curriculum and modernizing pieces of our curriculum in terms of how we teach it, how we approach it. And I've heard the term, and I don't know if this is the right term, and this may be getting into the how. So I don't know, but just the term that I've heard is universal design learning, I guess is what, or universal design. And I don't know if that is what I mean, or what we were talking about, really kind of revamping our curriculum and the way, and it's happening already, but that was a question that's like, are we applying this to other disciplines? And then also assessing that, making sure we're measuring that that's effective. So that's, I don't know, I just feel like that was, when we were talking about it in the committee, I was like, this is kind of a goal rather than, so.
That to me falls under the umbrella of staff development. And so from a staff development objective, your superintendent would recommend there are certain training skills, techniques, et cetera. That's a common one, but it typically falls under that staff development objective kind of thing. And that's where your superintendent with his team can determine those kind of things that bring in state-of-the-art teaching techniques, et cetera. Yep, so I listed it as staff development, so I'll build an objective around that, and you all can talk about it.
Okay, did we capture it all? Because I know, we wanted to stick to 8:30, but we've gone over. Okay, I think we've captured it all. Did anybody have anything else? Okay, on
Good
that,
discussion.
thank
Lot of
you,
good
Jesse,
discussion, so.
for your help. This
I will
is the
get
first
this to
time
you.
we've done it in this way, and I think this was really good, giving us the process. So I thank you. I thank the administration for coming out on an additional night. It's been a long week for everybody, so thank you. With that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Ms. Stratton, all in favor? Aye. Thanks, have a good night.